out of jail, lose so much weight. He actually took a job out in San Francisco at a super cool tech startup called Betty Labs.
Whoa.
So he is out of Tallahassee. For those of you who didn't get that joke, that's okay, that's your first time. And I'm Sean Pfeiffer, and this is actually going to be my first time hosting Startup Grind as well. You're not here to talk to me though, you're only here to talk about Barbara, founder of Women's Wednesdays, founder of Shop Tally, founder of Swellcoin. That's all of them, yep. So we're going to talk about, we're going to shoot for an hour, but I'm a little nervous, so it might end up being closer to 45 minutes. We'll talk at the end, we'll have like a quick Q&A, and then we'll have we'll break out some coffee, and we can have like a little post-event networking going on, and we can get on out of here. Sounds good?
Sounds good. Sounds great.
Sweet. I also have a little notebook with me because, again, I'm no expert at this yet.
Well, before we get started, can I give you a compliment?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes.
Big fan of that.
Well, I totally want to give you a compliment because you just had an incredible choice, and I don't mean about selecting me. Good taste. But I do mean that you did select somebody that's from the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs.
Number one city for them, actually.
And are we number 5 city for women?
No.
Number one city for women. So I really want to thank you and compliment you for making that kind of choice. But you have all kinds of options for your very first person to interview. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I thought you were an absolute all-star. I see you in here at least twice a week in Domi Station. You're absolute pro's pro. And I know you can talk a lot, which is really what I needed from this first event. So to get us started, I didn't want to start right away where we are already. So I wanted to take us back, all the way back actually. So when you were growing up, like 5 to 15, like what were you like? How did you what were natural strengths you had? What were hobbies you were into? Just kind of like what you were like as a kid.
Okay, so I don't know any of the questions he's going to ask. But that's easy to ask. So I would say about myself is that one of the things about me is I grew up in very humble, modest beginnings. So, just to give you an example, and not that it even matters, but I grew up in this trailer park, and I would say it's not even the nicest trailer in the trailer park. And I remember the people up at the end of my street had a double wide. And my perception at that time was like, my God, those people are so rich.
Double wide.
A double wide, they have so much money. And so, and I think the way I grew up, I think about my parents being honest, being compassionate. Those are really important things. But I would say for my mother, I learned a lot about perseverance and just toughing it out and keep going and sticking to what you want to do. But I would say for my dad, who was a police officer, he's one of those people that to fight for yourself and stand up for yourself. All throughout my life, he would always be, don't take it from anybody. And whether it was my husband or because even if my husband was giving me crap, my dad would be behind there going, he would always say, push back, just don't take it. But I think growing up in Maine, and I think my family will attest to this, it's a more, it's not, Maine's a tougher go, especially way back when. It's a very harsh climate, and people didn't have a lot of money, and you really figure out and learn how to do things. And so people from Maine typically can fix cars, do anything with houses, do electrical work, do plumbing work, and so I feel like I'm also a jack of all trades. I learned a lot of mechanical abilities, and there's just a little bit of toughness, I think, that comes from.
Sure. I'm sure that jack of all trades, wearing many hats is pretty helpful in the startup world. Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you said your dad was a police officer. What did your mother do?
So my mother, she did all kinds of different things. So my mother grew up in a real rural kind of village. Her father was a sailmaker. He made sails for ships and things like that. It was a sail loft, and I remember my mother, my grandparents making sails for ships, and we were always playing in that. And neither of my parents come from education. Education wasn't a big thing in our family. but exceptionally hard workers. And so my mother, whether making sales, working in, sales for ships, whether making, trade like tourist things, sewing shirts, the sewing industry used to be huge in Maine, making shoes, all this sort of stuff. She had a background in sewing and making things, and eventually she got her, a nursing assistant sort of thing, and she worked in the medical thing. But my mother, if you've seen a video with me, my mother, I say something about her chainsaw in hand. She got this piece of land. She didn't have a lot. My parents divorced, and she had very little. She got this piece of land, and I swear to you, she had a chainsaw, she had a shovel, she had this, she that. She cleared that land herself. She made her way. As a woman on her own, I think that was very, very difficult. And there's challenges that women face, and again, my mother has always been a model for perseverance.
Oh, I'm sure. That's beautiful that your mother was like this absolute all-star person. And
She's an all-star, she really is. And most what happens, my dad has an incredible personality, he's a great storyteller. Everybody just loves my dad. Yeah, you know, sorry. Everybody would love it, but it's actually my mom's an unsung hero. That probably doesn't get the credit she deserves, but she's just a workhorse.
That's awesome that your mom was such a hardworking person. Now you're here, Sorry Women's Wednesdays, getting other women to do hard work. That's poetic justice. So your parents didn't go to college. Were grades important to you? Like, what were you as a student when you were younger?
My parents always said just work hard and be good to people. And I really don't think, in my background, I don't think education was important. It just really, it just wasn't. However, I married someone, my husband is Les, he's right there. He went to Harvard and Georgetown, highly educated person, so I've had an interesting life. I come from a very, modest background and been married into, just the different spectrum. So it's been an interesting ride.
Cool. Wow. So, can we talk about you going to college and where you went to college and how that all worked out for you?
Well, what I did is, so when I was in high school, I think I just had the luckiest thing in the world that could ever happen to me happen, and that is, there was a club called AFS, it's called the American Field Service, and
Field Service, is it?
American Field Service, and so that's a program, exchange program that sends students overseas, and I don't know, I just got picked to be the student from my high school to go overseas, and go have a seat, come on in, sit down.
Nice. How you doing? Welcome to South Africa.
I got selected to be the AFS student, and I was selected to go to the country of Sri Lanka. And
no way.
Yeah, so I spent, just had an incredible experience. Wait, well, now I forget your question. What was your question?
This is where we're going on now. This is where we're going.
I went to Sri Lanka, but now I don't know why I'm telling you.
So how long were you there?
Oh, I didn't go to college. That's what I was going to tell you. But I did go to Sri Lanka. But what happened was, because I went to Sri Lanka, so growing up in Maine and growing up the way I grew up, I truly just didn't know another world was out there. I'm telling you, I did not know another world was out there. But when I went to Sri Lanka, and that sort of opened me up, like, oh my God, this is, because Sri Lanka is an island off the tip of India, and we're talking back in 1980. It was very different there, and it was, it was a pretty unique experience. And I just thought, I gotta go. I gotta see more of this world. And so when I got back, I finished high school, but then I went into the Air Force. And so in the Air Force, then I did start working on my education. So
There it is.
but not till.
How old were you when you went to Sri Lanka? How long was it for?
I was a junior in high school. The summer between junior and senior high school, I went to Sri Lanka. But then right out of high school, I went into the Air Force. So I went to travel.
Oh, cool. So, talk about, actually I had a conversation with Sabrina about this earlier today. People so often have a plan for what their life's going to look like in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and so often that kind of gets derailed. So, what was your original game plan for what life was supposed to look like for you once you got into the Air Force?
Well, once I got into the Air Force, so one of the things when you go into the military, you have to take, I forget what the test is called, you have to take this test and they decide what your what your skill sets are. And I'm very mechanically inclined. And I think one of those strengths that helped me as a startup entrepreneur now is like, I'm good at putting pieces together, figuring out what pieces belong together. But I tested well, and I think I mentioned this to you, it ended up in the Air Force. I was in the Electronic Security Command, and it might sound crazy, but it was espionage. It was surveillance of the Soviet Union. But way back when, for surveillance, it really involved a lot of mechanics. It's not like it is today. So there was this huge wall of equipment, very technical, but way back when, we're talking in the 80s kind of equipment, where you really have to patch everything together, operate the equipment, blah, blah, blah. And it was about intercepting Soviet communication.
Oh my goodness. So when I was doing my due diligence of, researching what Barbara has done, I was on her LinkedIn, and it said Air Force, like electronic communication system, classified information. I was like, you better believe I'm asking about that. So I need to hear some kind of fantastic story from that.
Well,
you were a spy.
So things that would happen during that time. So say it's sort of interesting, like if you think about what's happening today. But the Soviet Union shot down an airliner, KL flight, whatever it was. And so I worked that night. And so what happens way back when, you're intercepting all this military type communication, so it's pretty important. Or another example would, getting that communication was critical. And then I think some other things, when you have, back then we didn't have satellites, all the stuff you have today. So if we had an airplane that was doing, some sort of surveillance right along the boundary line with the Soviet Union, we would be intercepting their tracking. They're tracking us, they're tracking our aircraft. Or even looking at their weather, or just, current events, things that are happening here. There was just this constant effort, and literally it involved, like I said, patching together a lot of equipment, but it also involved dialing through frequencies, breaking out electronic signals, identifying, because you can imagine if you're looking at signals basically from the world, or within a region, or identifying where those signals are coming from, not by the methods that we have today. You had to identify where that signal was coming from, if it was a Soviet signal, capture, different means to capture that signal, and then send it to the National Security Agency.
Wow. So there's that. So now we don't have to spies. So now we're spies.
I don't know what led the game so much. But it's not true that you hacked our election.
But on that level, I can't tell you that in any sort of field, when you get in that sort of sphere, I'm telling you, there is a book of documents that you have to sign about your behavior as a person, about what you do with this information. There's just so much rigidity about you as a person. So it is sort of interesting, looking at kind of what's happening today.
Wow.
So it's interesting.
Fantastic.
I don't know.
So it went from being a super spy in the Air Force, and now you end up in Tallahassee.
Yes.
I think the how you end up in Tallahassee story is always a pretty good one for everyone. It's very different. It's usually pretty fun. So
one of the things that happens when you do that much electronic surveillance, that involves wearing a lot of headsets, it's highly squelchy, it's really loud stuff. And I just felt like, oh my God, I'm losing my hearing. And so I went to the Air Force Base Clinic, and I went to the doctor. And I just happened, the doctor I went to happens to be sitting right there.
Her hearing's fine.
But he wears hearing aids. So no, he was the doctor I went to, and it was like a big no-no because I was enlisted, no college education, went into the Air Force, enlisted, and he was a medical doctor, so, but for me, from my place in life where I came from, that was just like, oh my God. So, but we somehow,
that's why we're still in Tallahassee.
Well, it just his, a lot of this had to do with his career and where it took him. And we're a family, and so we work, we went a lot of different places together after that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but it ultimately ended up here.
So like, I guess these two questions can kind of like combine, but like, when did you realize you were going to like pivot and enter like the entrepreneurial field?
Well, so most people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, it kind of shows itself in a lot of ways earlier in their life. So one of the things, as a married couple, we were always buying houses, fixing them up, selling them, and in fact, my husband, even though he's, like, I'm not saying like bragging, like, oh, he's a doctor, I don't mean it that way, and Melanie knows this, my husband has worked in public health his whole career, so it's not like we had something fancy, and set up. She worked in public health, she knows it's not a big lucrative field. But one of the things we always did is renovate homes. And so I think that entrepreneurial thing started, just started renovating homes. Renovating homes ultimately led to, going back to my home state and buying like this massive fixer-upper that happened to be on the ocean, and then having the need to rent that out. And then in the process of renting out our house, other people wanted me to rent their house. And I went from, I just hit the market really, really good, and I went from renting my own house out to about having 7 properties that I did all the booking. They weren't all my properties. I did the bookings. 7-0. And I ended up forming a business. It was called a Better View Vacation Rental. And so I worked that business, but it got to a point that it was not, I was still living here in Tallahassee doing a rental business in Maine, and it just wasn't, you just can't, even though I used the online marketplace, blah, 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 I had to sell it, and, which was great.
So how old were you at the time? When you
This is
first
right when
got
my
like,
kids, this is
going?
my son Evan, and it's just when I was, my kids, I'd throw the kids in the car to go up to Maine from Florida, and moms would appreciate it.
In the car?
So I would drive here from Tallahassee, and I literally would have one hand on the steering wheel, and I'd have the other hand separating my 2 kids. And I'd drive to Maine, and and then they worked with me. We renovated. When I say we renovated, I'm not kidding. It was a major renovation.
It was a crap hole.
And then they helped me with the rental business. So that's, I think, what a lot of moms do. You just make it work with the kids.
Sure. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so I've made the drive from Tallahassee to Philly by myself exactly one time. That was pure horror.
It was a problem.
But it's just it's what I'm saying. So I just can't imagine also having 2 kids arguing in your bed. It's just a whole other fantastic experience in itself.
Well, that's all changing, like having a movie, a VCR.
Yeah.
Definitely driving, looking at a paper map.
Right.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I don't get that joke. So, did you have were you learning on the fly for making this Better View homestead? Like, was this something you had planned, or was this like you just happened to be fixing houses and it worked, and then you flipped another one, and then it was like it grew as you got going, or was it really like it wasn't really thought out as like, oh, this is gonna be my first time hitting a startup?
No, it really worked as fixed up, or it was necessity. So we had a house we fixed up, but we didn't have the income to just, let's have a house, a second home that we don't. So it was out of necessity. We've got to keep this thing rented to pay the mortgage. But then, like I said, I hit the market right. This is before Airbnb, but there was VRBO. There were different things like that, and so agents in town was still the old way. Agents would by the phone book properties, but I just said, oh man, this VRBO. So I was like, woo, getting all these rentals, and so people were like, whoa, she's killing it. So I got a lot of rental properties to start doing their bookings, and I got people more money, more weeks booked. So it sort of grew from there.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So with that being your first technical entrepreneurial experience, how would you say that shaped you as an entrepreneur going forward? Like, what were some big takeaways you got from that first experience? I'm sure there was.
Well, one
ton of learning
huge
going
thing
on.
that I learned from that is, as a rental agent, you're responsible for things totally that you don't control. And that is, as a rental agent, you're responsible for homes that are not your homes, and you're responsible for people that you can't control their behavior. And I didn't like that. That was one of the things I was most happy about getting rid of that business, because it was just, it's impossible. Because you don't have control, you have control over nothing, yet you're responsible for everything. So I was happy to see that business go away, even though I think it's a cool business and you can do well with it, but I was glad to see it go by the wayside. But I think it exemplified changing trends in technology and how powerful that can be in a worldwide marketplace, and the volume, just what you can do from using technology and the quick pace with what it changes quickly.
So just to here, quick rewind, you said like you sold that business because you were running from Florida and it's up in Maine and it just got too much of a hassle, too much of driving with the kids in the car, right?
It wasn't the kids in the car.
I'm sure it wasn't.
It was a summer day. We had a ball. It was a blast. They were having a total. Were we having a blast or what?
Watching Good Burger in the backseat.
We had fun,
Yeah.
but it got unwieldy. You can't, it just got unwieldy. And then I did not like being so responsible for things that and if you really, like if you're renting someone else's home, the homeowner, they don't always do the right thing. And the renters don't, like when everybody does the right thing, it works out great. Like renting out my own home, I love, because we set a standard, or try to set a standard that we go by. But, that's just but I think it's important to learn, it's all learning, and then you learn what you like, but you also learn what you don't like. So that was good, but I think it was an introduction to the power of technology and get some familiarity with that.
Which is pretty important for our business now, if we're all on the same page.
No, but I a lot of us in the room will remember the first time, like, oh, email, what's email? And just learning what email is. So that's my generation. So there was a big learning curve here.
Cool. So that was like your first taste in entrepreneurship. I kind of wanted to flash forward a little like closer to today. When did you start Women's Wednesdays, and like what was that process like?
Well, I think I have to back up to, I think that comes later. So I think before I talk about Women Wednesdays, I could tell you that, but I would have to first tell you about starting Swellcoin, or before that, starting Point Catcher.
Yeah, we can start with point catchers.
Yeah. So the long story of how I started Point Catcher, I volunteered for an organization, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if they had a points program for this organization? And then the more I researched the points industry, like the loyalty points industry, I thought, man, this is way better. And just an evolution of ideas, and ultimately, I actually watched the movie The Social Network, and I thought, what if you take a points program and organic network, blah, 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 all these things working on Point Catcher. But then eventually that evolved into understanding what's happening today is you have a company like Amazon, which is a huge disruptor. But as a huge disruptor, disruptors also create a wake. And behind the disruptor is, there can be hardship, but there can also be opportunity. And so the recognition for me on my entrepreneurial journey was that we have over 19,000 cities in this country. And right here in Tallahassee, as well as elsewhere, communities are losing local foot traffic. And while there used to be shop your community or buy local initiatives that was sort of, yeah, get out there, altruistic, let's do it, that it's going to take more than that now. And so, again, evolution of, working on our entrepreneurial journey is just the recognition that I want to create a model that incentivizes shopping your community. So on that journey for creating Shop Town and Swellcoin, is having the great honor to be in this place, to be at Dolby Station.
Of course.
So, but part of that honor and part of that experience, it's not the case today, but when Domi first started, there were two huge drivers, and two of those huge drivers are also still listed on the back walls of that building, and one is FAMU and one is FSU. and there was a huge interest in this community to keep college students here. And while that is incredibly important, it's a noble cause, it's wonderful, there just happens to be something that is true. And that is most women, for a variety of reasons, who start their entrepreneurial journey, they tend to be a little bit older. So for me as an entrepreneur, I felt there was a disconnect in our startup ecosystem between this great sense of opportunity, wonderful opportunity that we have here, but the age at which women start businesses. So that's why I started Women Wednesdays.
Wow. Well, we have two other things we can walk back to. But yeah, so that was your inspiration, was like you saw a lot of things going on for students, and you're like, wait a second, like there's an entire untapped market of
Right, and I didn't know it right away, but the more I was trying to do what I was trying to do, because what happens, because this place is a place, it's DOMI, which means Latin for home, it's a home for entrepreneurs. And the more diverse this community is, then the better it is for everyone. But in the beginning, and I don't think this is true anymore, but just in the beginning, it just happened to be more student focused. And so for me as an entrepreneur, I felt like an outlier.
Right.
You know, just so separate. And I had a blast. It was awesome. I loved it. But for team building, that can pose some challenges. And so at the time, Michael Wyden was the executive director here. And so I said, we need more women permanent. They had their hands full just trying to get the startup community going, blah, blah, blah.
Of course.
And so we worked out a deal. I said, look, let me work on women's programming, in exchange for being here. And he said yes, and that's how it all started.
Wow, that's awesome. So what was that first Wednesday like? What was the turnout? Were you nervous?
It
Were you
started
me
out
right
a
now?
little, it started out a little slow. And, I think that also was a startup sort of thing, starting out slow, finding your way, finding out what people want. It started out as free co-working for women it's really what's important, I think, in any sort of group that isn't part of an ecosystem, is to just have your arms wide open and just have a warm welcome. I talked about my grandparents being sail makers. Well, my grandmother was this amazing lady who just was warm. She just was warm. You went to that house and you were just always warmly welcome. And I think in an entrepreneurial ecosystem, that sort of same warmth of welcoming people. People are scared when they're first starting out, but I think for certain particular groups, it's helpful to have an extra warm welcome so that they know, yeah, we need you too. You gotta welcome that.
So when did you start picking up momentum? Like when did you start to realize that, hey, this is something we can run with?
When I was researching issues that face women, because when women are grossly underfunded, it's like when you look at the data for women, it's not an imaginary, it's not like, oh man, it's like, it's like, good. So after doing a little research, but as part of my research, I found this great fact, and that is the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs is Black women. They're growing at a rate of 322%, 6 times faster than any startup group. And so I had a celebration. It was for Startup Week. And I would say, I think that's the most exciting thing to me that's happened for Women Wednesdays is the recognition of what incredible, women we have in this community, whether they're Black or they're white, but there's just incredible untapped potential. But when you have women walk in this place, it's a good reason to pay attention because they're a great group of entrepreneurs that are eager to make some things happen.
Most certainly. So from that momentum point of Startup Week to all the way back from the beginning, how much did doubt or fear play a role in that growth? Did you ever doubt yourself? Did you ever go wait a second, maybe I'm speaking to a wall, maybe people aren't getting
All the
this?
time. So whether it's with Shop Tally with Swellcoin, and when I first started Women Wednesdays, there was people that didn't agree with it. And
Didn't agree with Women Wednesdays.
they didn't agree with Women Wednesdays, but I think it's sometimes people don't always understand what their intentions are. It can be misconstrued. And I think there was a sense that it was sort of like a weakness. That when we were acting like women are weak, and you gotta do special treatment for women because they're weak. But it really wasn't that. It was that it's about programming. And so if you value something, then like there's techno, there's a lot of programming for different groups, and I still want programming, funded programming that reaches out to a variety of different talent pools in our community. Because I do think it's a hindrance if you only reach out to students, which that's great, let's do it, let's reach out to students. But really the success of this community is when we embrace all the different groups of people who work together.
Sure.
But I know it's gonna happen, so I'm excited about it. I see a lot of things at Domi that I just know that it's already happening. You walk in here now and there's plenty of women, there's plenty of minorities, there's plenty of everybody, and that just breeds success.
Awesome. So like, where do you see like the future for like Women's Wednesdays, and like how do you see that panning out?
I see other communities calling me and saying, having interest in a Women Wednesdays there. I see whether it's TCC or different organization around town calling and saying, hey, Terrence just left, but he's with Working Class Wednesdays. I think we're at a great place where this community wants everybody to come together. So we have all these ecosystems developing for entrepreneurs, and I just think there's a yearning to have everybody be a part of it.
Oh, most and it's actually funny, like someone who's been blessed enough to intern at Domi and works at a startup now that operates from Domi, like sometimes I think like I'm sipping the Kool-Aid of like what Tallahassee can be and like what we're capable of. Like, look at what's gone down like the past 5 years. Like imagine the next 5 years. Like how fantastic can all this be? And sometimes I really do think I'm just like sipping the Kool-Aid and talking to myself, but like I completely agree
Well,
with
it's
you.
not
Like,
good because you are sitting in a place of opportunity.
yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree. So I'm glad it's not. I'm not the only person
No,
who
you're not
feels
the
that
only
way.
person, not at all.
But like to speak to that, Tallahassee's growth, I remember previously talking to you about you being here before the Domi station was here and before
Right.
we really had this entrepreneurial fabric woven. So can you tell me like what that was like being here without the
Yeah,
resources?
so when I first had this business idea, and it's just like, just think about it, Domi wasn't here really, so much of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that we see today, it just wasn't here.
Mhm.
So it was really, I remember my husband, he saw an article in the paper one time, it was actually someone from Railroad Square doing a startup weekend. And that was the first time that my husband was like, man, Barb, you should go do that startup weekend. So that was my first thing, but none of this stuff was here. So if you were an entrepreneur, it's just like, there was no central focused place of like, where do I go? So I went to the chamber. And then from the chamber, there's a guy named Larry Lynch, he directed me to something called the Entrepreneurial Excellence Program. But to have a physical building that you could just show up at and find like-minded people, that just wasn't here. So it was actually Christian Dozier and Ken Morris got a whole bunch of different people from the community. They had these stakeholder forums right next door in the old Amtrak station. And they literally just got the community together and said, we need a community incubator. How can we make that happen? And then they happened to connect with a group that formed what became Domi Ventures and then eventually Domi Station. And I was sitting in those stakeholder forums. I remember the first night when that group walked in. It's like, oh, who are they? And they ended up being the people that got this off the ground. And
That's awesome.
this was just an empty warehouse. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
And
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting.
it was
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
different.
that was-
We had these motorized bikes. We would ride all through here. It was
Can we
an
still do
empty
that?
shell.
Can we still get the motorized bikes going?
I'm trying to find them, but I don't know who took them.
They might be in the back. So that's awesome. But I'd really like to get deep into that point catchers and Swellcoin transformation and
Yeah.
how that happened. So first of all, I think a good question for a lot of people who are looking to start a venture or whatever is, how long did you sit on the idea of like, oh, like a point system would be cool to actually taking steps to make something happen? Because I know personally, like one of my biggest fears is always like the fear of the first step. Like just getting the ball rolling is really hard. It's like how long did it take for you to decide like this is something I can
It took a
take
long
action
time
on?
because I was terrified. It's more the personal stuff. So I happen to believe what I'm doing with point catchers, I happen to believe that it's brilliant. I really do. I've never for a nanosecond, and I mean a nanosecond, have I doubted that what I'm doing is, I believe in fully. but having the confidence to go and approach other people or be able to say it succinctly. Though to me, it was more the personal things and having the confidence and courage and the ability to succinctly explain it to others. That was the hard part. And so for me, starting out, and I would say I started out here greener than green. I didn't know what ROI was. I didn't know what Maine Startup Model was. I just knew nothing. And it's just like I knew I had a great idea, but I knew nothing else.
Right.
And so it was terrifying.
So, what was it like? What were those first couple steps that you did take, like beyond just research? Like, what was your first like actionable, like, look, I did it, guys, step that you made?
Because I was fumbling along trying to do it,
Of
and I really
course.
was just fumbling along, I got invited to those stakeholder forums. Because I was at the stakeholder forums, I got an early invite to interview with the original Domi people. Because I just happened to be an early invite, I got the opportunity to be one of the early people in here. But again, I was so green, just so, I did not know what I was doing.
Of course. So, like, what was like a main high? Like, what was a high point for your time with point catchers, and like, what was a low point for point catchers? I'd like to hear what that was like.
It's hard to explain. I do think it was an incredible high to be a part of the beginning of Domi Station. I think that in the people that I met and the journey we were on growing, not just point catcher, but trying to grow the startup ecosystem, because it really was something that everybody was working on together. And I would say the low point for me with point catcher is you can find yourself in a precarious situation where it doesn't take much for other people to leave you bloodied laying in a ditch. So I don't know.
Makes sense at the beginning. Really highlighting that.
But I think my husband would agree.
Supposed to be inspiring.
Not that real, right?
I don't want to paint too positive.
I mean, you can, this is, it's business. And, things can get snarly. And especially if you don't exactly know what you're doing and have all the skill sets you need, you can find yourself on the wrong, in a bad situation. It's not something I can talk about, but it's something that I hope to write about someday.
More classified information.
It can be, business can be rough and tumble.
Right.
And, that's where the things, you gotta be careful. But those, anything like that though teaches you different things. And it was something I didn't know that I could recover from. But I did. And I had help. I had people, unexpected people that when I thought, it's done, I'm over, I'm out of here, unexpected people can help you pick yourself back up and get back on your journey again.
Nice.
And so I was able to do that.
So, snarly was such a fantastic word, I thought. When things were getting snarly, is that like, what was the time frame when you like started to see like you should transition to Swellcoin or like pivot towards Swellcoin instead of point catchers, or what was that relationship between the two like, and when did you realize that you needed to shift gears?
I had already sort of figured a lot of this out with point catcher, and then I would say a lot of people thought point catcher was I don't know if they would know it was a failure, but we actually had a lot of really good things about it. But I'm getting sidetracked on your question again. It just takes so much of everything that I had put into point catcher, and I could put it into Swellcoin, but I could take the best. But if I learned anything, it's MVP, MVP, MVP. I would say one of the biggest mistakes, and that's big, one of the biggest mistakes, I made so many mistakes. We could have just a whole night on my mistakes. But
So see you guys next Thursday?
But I mean, it really is following the lean startup model. Definitely just developing an MVP. And for people who don't know what that is, it's building a minimum viable product. Point catcher probably I thought it was an MVP, it wasn't. It had too many bells and whistles, too many things, and you just can't get it across the finish line. And so I was able to take knowing, don't ever do that again. Build the bare minimum, get that across. Now, I still haven't done even that across the finish line, so it's not like it's an easy journey. I mean, I've got a little bit more